Okay, everyone, it's 12:30. I'm Julie Temple. I'm co-chair of the Essex and Ipswich branch, and I'm delighted to welcome David Allen from the Lighthouse Group, who's going to be talking to you today about mental toughness and well-being. David and I presented an event probably, I don't know, 3 maybe 4 weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it'd be useful if we could share David's insights and thoughts with the members. I know we're a little bit behind in terms of numbers, but I also know people are going to take the advantage of listening and watching, not live. So I will pass over to David, who's going to take the controls and talk to you about mental toughness and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Julie, and I trust my microphone is working and you can all hear me and see me. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm just about to share a screen with you. So we've got a few slides we'll show this afternoon. On our merry way down the route of mental toughness for well-being, a subject that I think, well, over the past few years has become more and more to the fore, and perhaps over the past few months even more so. I note the recent reports, the IPD report, looks at well-being and the fact that it is deteriorating perhaps in organisations, no great surprise. So over the next 45 minutes, hour or so, then what I'd like to do is just to give you some thoughts, some ideas, really food for thought more than anything else, and maybe a couple of tools that you can take away in regard to building mental toughness for well-being. So I'm trying to kind of explain the reasoning behind all of this. We'll ground it in something known as the 4C model of mental toughness. And as I say, hopefully it'll be something to enjoy and something you can take something away with. Be that as an individual, maybe this is for you. Maybe that over the past couple of months or so, then you may have struggled a little bit. Maybe you've actually enjoyed it a little bit too much, and maybe the struggle is going to come when you maybe have to go back to work in the way or back to the way you were, if indeed that's ever going to be the case. Or maybe this is for someone else, as a manager, as a leader, as someone who runs an organisation. Maybe this is about helping others develop a little bit of mental toughness and well-being. So in terms of who I am, my background is as a business psychologist. I work with the Lighthouse Group, a training organisation who focus solely on management and leadership development, both from a qualification route, and that is using to a large degree the apprenticeship levy. So we work on the apprenticeship programs and tied in with qualification organisations such as the ILM, CMI, etc. I also run a business called Let's Talk Tough. And Let's Talk Tough is a small consultancy, I guess, that works with organisations, sports clubs, and also schools in this kind of arena of mental toughness. So from a business psychology point of view, I've got a lot of experience with organisations, particularly in the sports environment. Then I am a positive psychology coach, which is becoming more and more to the fore within organisations. And also I'm an endurance athlete, so I kind of practice what I preach. So I do long distance Ironman triathlon distance and ultra triathlon distance events. So very much there is a combination of the kind of sport physical element of mental toughness, as well as what I see in the workplace. And our aims over the next, say, 45 minutes or so is, number one, maybe to clarify what we mean by mental toughness. So let me ask you that question immediately, and by all means, over the next sort of 5 minutes or so, use the chat box. And if you have a definition of mental toughness, be really interested to hear it, to see what you think in terms of mental toughness. What does that conjure up for you in terms of an image in your head? What do you see someone who is mentally tough being or doing? We will then look at the relationship between mental toughness and well-being, quite a complex relationship. So this will be a simplification in the sort of time we have, but hopefully it'll give you a pretty good idea of the relationship between mental toughness and well-being. And through that, the introduction introduction to this 4C model of mental toughness, probably the best validated model of mental toughness out there. So we can kind of have a look through that, and hopefully what we can do at the end is the last 10 minutes or so is just give you some ideas in terms of using the first C, the C of control. So maybe a little exercise on self-control, and maybe even if we do get the time to touch a tiny bit on emotional control. So we'll try and give you something practical at the end to work on. This is sort of one of a series of 8 webinars which looks at all aspects of the 4C model. So we're just going to get a snapshot and say we'll take one small slice of the pie over the time that we have. There's a quote that you may have used, that you may with your children, or you may as a child remember your parents saying it to you: do your best and enjoy it. Certainly I remember something that was said to me by my mother on the sidelines of my first football cup final, aged about 11 years old. And I do kind of remember thinking, well, obviously, I'm going to do my best, and I'm doing this because I enjoy it. It just seemed like a bit of a strange statement, and yet
David,
over the years now,
David,
yes.
Sorry, are you meant to be sharing your slides?
Is that not sharing?
No, we've just got.
That's interesting. Is that sharing?
Not currently, unless I'm looking.
I can see it fine.
Okay, it might just be then that I've got control, so I'm going to shut up and let you get on.
Thank you, folks. My heart started to go then. There's me rabbiting on and trying.
Sorry,
good.
David.
So hopefully you can see that graphic. Do your best and enjoy it. So we haven't got to the interesting slides yet, anyway. And so, as I say, this is something that I kind of saw as fairly obvious, but progressively, when I think about the working environment that I'm in at the moment, over the past 5 years in particular, perhaps, I just see less and less of it. You know, people perhaps doing their best, but whether they enjoy it is highly debatable. I do see people enjoying it and not necessarily doing their best. But I guess what I see progressively is the way I kind of describe it is you know, very highly capable people kind of unable to demonstrate their capability. They're unable to do their best because they're swamped, for want of a better expression. You know, there is so much going on. Whether that's just so much change, or whether that is just so much to do, digital technology, etc. And that makes it very difficult to enjoy. And so I want to just kind of bear that in mind and ask you the question, you know, to what degree are you able to do your best and those around you? And to what degree do you enjoy it? Because ultimately that's where we want to be, surely, is we want people to be able to, you know, to do their best and to enjoy that process. If we want consistency at work and high performance, then we need those two things. So where do we go with this? What is mental toughness? Well, I've got some definitions. I haven't seen the chat box yet, so I'm just going to pull the chat box up. I just wonder whether anyone has given any thoughts to it at all. Sorry, everyone's saying I can see here. Oh, there we go. I've got a few in here. Resilience when challenged mentally. I like that. Yeah, resilience. Okay, keeping going when under pressure. Resilience plus confidence. Okay, brilliant. So we've got some thoughts. We've got some ideas on what mental toughness is. We see it in others, or whether to what degree you have it yourself. Here's a couple. If you're going to spend a bit of time around Google, you'll kind of find things like this: being able to tackle the challenges that life throws at you. So that's kind of where one or two of you are coming from. And that kind of conjures up this concept of resilience, I think. But also perhaps is constantly taking on new challenges. So this desire almost to take on new challenges might sort of show mental toughness. We'll come back in a minute or two. Demonstrating grit. You may have heard of the book written, I don't know, 5 or so years ago, Angela Duckworth, I think it was, who talks about passion and perseverance, overriding talent to a large degree, or certainly as important as talent in terms of success at work. And so passion and perseverance are often linked with this thing called grit, which is often linked with mental toughness. Overcoming mental resistance, fear, for example, is where there's stuff that we kind of want to do or have to do, but there's that mental block to go and doing it. And it's our ability to kind of overcome our resistance to something. whatever that might be. And then we've got kind of two fairly straightforward ones: being the best you can be, waking up every morning and just doing your best, just whatever you can do. And part and parcel of that is that kind of never giving up, that mental toughness that says, you know, I will not give up, I will keep going. Something that I have to talk to myself around all the time when I'm doing this ultra stuff is, I won't give up, I must just keep going. And here's one right at the very end: a personality trait which determines how people respond to challenge, stress, and pressure. So we're getting a little bit academic here. This definition comes from Professor Peter Clough, who is the creator of the 4C model. So a psychologist, an ex-sports person as well, who spent sort of 15-20 years now working on this, alongside a guy called Doug Strajkovic. I didn't pronounce that particularly well, but a personality trait which determines how people respond to challenge, stress, and pressure. So this idea that it's a personality trait, and a plastic personality trait at that. And what I mean by that is it's one that can be developed. Now, arguably, all personality traits these days can be developed. Our new findings on things like neuroplasticity sort of say that we can make new neural networks and pathways. But mental toughness is what's often known as a fairly soft plastic trait, i.e. it's not that difficult to develop. But I think, like all things, and I think this is key for me and key perhaps for this talk, it's kind of about two things. Is number one, you've got to do something. So it's very practical. This is about finding small things that you can do consistently that make a difference. So I think building mental toughness, building a personality trait, means consistently putting things into action, giving things a go. And there's that concept of kind of baby steps. It is these small things, but progressive, i.e. the kind of one leads to another. And I want to show you an exercise around that towards the end, which is that self-control bit we talked about, a practical exercise that maybe kind of ties into this development of a trait. I guess there are three things that really sum it up for me, what I call the sort of three elements of mental toughness. And number one is a word you've already used in your chat box quite a lot: resilience. Bounce back ability, I think, is often the way it's coined. So our ability to bounce back after adversity. We get knocked down and we get back up again. I kind of see these things in using the sports analogy, boxing. The boxer that gets knocked down but gets back up again is the image that we often kind of attach to resilience. But as well as resilience, I think we should also use this word fortitude. And what I mean by fortitude is kind of not being knocked down in the first place. So this strength, this ability to kind of stand strong in adversity, so we won't get knocked down. But I think here lies a little bit of a problem, because often we see this hardness attached to mental toughness, this kind of brick wall, this I'm going to be so strong I will not get knocked over. And I think that's good to a degree, but I don't necessarily think that's everything. I think fortitude is also the ability to kind of bob and weave a bit, to kind of go with the flow, to be able to kind of roll with the punches, to use the boxing analogy. So fortitude is to a certain degree to accept that things happen, that there are things that you cannot control, and to be okay with that. To be strong even when there are things going on that we don't like, that we don't want. So both of those, I think, are extremely important. But we also alluded to this third one, which is endeavour. And this is a kind of element that was added to mental toughness sort of more recently. And endeavour is about this kind of looking forward. This is about embracing challenge and change. This is about kind of wanting to take risk, wanting to do things that are different. And maybe now is an absolute time where we need endeavour. We need people who are going to be driving changes, who are wanting to make things happen, who are going to need to take risks. And so, that endeavourous element, that challenge element, that risk element, I think is extremely important when we talk about mental toughness. It's not all about kind of what life throws at us. It's what we want to throw at life, perhaps. And I think that brings quite a sort of positive view on mental toughness. So I think those three things together make up sort of my picture of mental toughness. I guess the question why then is also important. There are many kind of whys, and I've picked out probably the three biggest whys. You know, why mental toughness? Why do we need to do this kind of stuff? Well, first, all the research says that those that are mentally tougher, and I'll explain that in a moment or two, tend to demonstrate more positive behaviours, tend to have more of a can-do attitude. They tend to be more glass kind of half full. They tend to go down the endeavour route a little bit more, is looking to take on challenges and to be positive about the stuff that happens to them. There's always a good within a bad somewhere down the line. So positive behaviour at school and particularly at work are absolutely traits that come out when we talk about mental toughness, as is performance. So high performance is linked to mental toughness. And Dr. Peter Clough talks about, the research will say that around, and there's ongoing research here, between sort of 20 and 25% of high performance can often be attributed to just mental toughness alone. So a lot of the research is done around the exam results in schools and universities where it originally came from. It's been proven in the sporting environment, and I think there's lots of work going on in the working environment. But whatever the percentage figure is that, and most of us can see it anyway, is high performance. You know, those people that tend to be high performers, you would attribute as often being mentally tough. That ability to rise to challenge and to be able to accept when things are tough and to thrive when things are tough. And then finally, well-being. Mental toughness is important in terms of well-being. And I want to kind of describe what I mean by well-being in a minute or two. But essentially, it is that kind of sense of happiness, perhaps. If we kind of go into a definition, then that kind of being comfortable, healthy or happy at work, as I said, it's to what degree we are able to do our best and be happy doing it. Contentment, perhaps, is well-being. And this is the kind of thing that maybe, we are struggling more and more with. We were before the virus hit, and perhaps even more so now. Although I do, nod, as I said earlier on, is there are some people whose well-being maybe have increased because they've spent more time at home and are finding they're spending less time travelling and in a stressful working environment. And maybe the well-being might suffer having to go back to work or a different type of work. But whatever, there is a definition of well-being, a kind of broad definition. For those that are interested, and again, this is something that again has become sort of more and more popular recently, Stoicism. Any of you who have studied the ancient Greek Roman philosophy, the Stoics, there's a lot we can learn from the Stoics when it comes to well-being and mental toughness. And it's a very deep and quite complex philosophy. But here I think it is in a nutshell, and I've stolen this from the little book of Stoicism. And so if you're interested in this kind of stuff and want an introduction and a kind of simple read, then I'm going to point you in that direction. But the Stoic happiness triangle, the Stoics talked about eudaimonia, which is kind of your inner happy demon. So what we might call well-being, and I don't want to get too caught up in translations, but the quest was for eudaimonia, to be kind of happy in life, to have well-being, a smoothly flowing life, it was often described as. And there were three elements to that, as you can see. So number one, this concept of taking responsibility, ownership, something that we talk about a lot in the working environment, is to what degree people feel that they are able to take responsibility, to have autonomy, etc. Are we willing to do so? But as well as responsibility, probably the key one for the Stoics was about focusing on what you control. This belief with the Stoics was there are some things that you can and there's some things that you can't control. Focus on the ones that you can, in really simplistic terms, was an absolute core belief of the Stoics. And again, I'll come back to that in a second or two. And then finally, this third element, which is living with arete. Arete is your your best self, I guess. Your virtuous self, as often it's described as. Sometimes the way it's seen is there is the way we are today, if you like, and the way we would like to be today. Your ideal self, and how often are you able to be your ideal self, your best self? On a day-to-day basis, are you able to be your best self? And if not, how far below it is your actual self on a day-to-day basis? So that ability to live with virtue, your ability to live to be your best self on a day-to-day basis was a quest of the Stoics. So I think in terms of mental toughness and well-being, we can grab quite a lot from the Stoics and their thought, even if it's just in that Stoic happiness triangle. But let's kind of ground it in a bit more. Let's go a little bit deeper in terms of well-being before we go down the mental toughness route in the 4C model. I can make a little PDF available to you after the talk, at the back end of the talk, for those that are interested. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the 14 characteristics of well-being. And what I would quite encourage you to do is you can do this mentally as we go along right now. I guess, on a scale of, let's call it 1 to 10. 10 being that this characteristic is the embodiment of you, and you demonstrate it, you do it, you live it on a day-to-day basis. Down to 1, which is you've never heard of this characteristic, and you wouldn't even dream of doing it if you had heard of it. And somewhere in between is your scale. Just give yourself a little mental kind of score for each one of these characteristics. As I say, there's a PDF that I can just give you, which allows you to write your score down against each one of these characteristics. So if you want to kind of spend a bit more time doing it and give it a bit more thought, and I'd highly encourage that, then please do so. So I'm going to skip through these relatively quickly. I think they're relatively self-explanatory, but by all means in the chat box, then ask a question or seek clarification. So number 1, no particular order with these, but happiness, no surprise there. So think about it maybe over the past month or so. To what degree have you felt happiness? Do you feel happy and cheerful? How consistently do you feel happy and cheerful? 10 if you are just the happiest person that ever lived and have been consistently every day, 24 hours a day, and 1 if you're not. Vitality, energy. So to what degree have you and do you feel energetic, full of energy and vitality? What's that looking like at the moment? Number 3 is calmness. Calm and relaxed. Maybe this one's taken a little bit of a knock over the past month or two for some. Maybe people, as I say, have found a bit more calmness and relaxation working from home or in a different environment. So how calm are you? Optimistic is an interesting one. How optimistic are you about the future? Given for many of us, the future is pretty uncertain, short, medium, and long term. But are you one of these glass half full? Are you optimistic and hopeful about what that looks like for you? And number 5, involved and engaged in what you do. I'm doing a talk later on this afternoon, a webinar on engagement. To what degree do you feel engaged? I think this one has taken a bit of a knock, as for many of us working remotely, we just don't feel quite as engaged as we were. If you're working in an environment where you are kind of working with people on a day-to-day basis, then I think some people have struggled with that. Is just feeling less engaged, physically, remotely, mentally more remote. And number 6, awareness, being in touch with how you feel. Are you one of these people who are self-aware and in touch with how you feel? Do you take time out to consider how you feel? I think one of the best bits of advice that I would ever give you is to take time every day just to kind of get in touch with how you feel about where you're at right now. Particularly when we go through significant change, then I think it's so important to kind of just touch base with yourself. One of the things I'm always talking about people at work is taking time to think, taking time at work to think about work, and also how you feel about work. Your relationship with work and with others at work, I think, is so important. We should do it domestically, we should do it socially, and we should do it professionally. At number 7, acceptance. Following, I guess, awareness is are you able to accept the way you are? Are you comfortable in your own skin and the way you are at the moment, the way things are for you at the moment? How's that looking for you? And number 8, self-worth. liking yourself. So we talk about self-worth, self-confidence, self-efficacy. All of these things kind of tie in. You can spend a whole hour just talking about this one within itself. But to what degree do you like yourself? Competence, maybe again, this one has taken a little bit of knock for one or two, is feeling highly effective at what you do. Maybe the nature of what you do has changed. Maybe the way you work has had to change, whether it's just learning to Zoom or to work Microsoft Teams, etc. Maybe competence has taken a little bit of a knock, and you're having to learn new skills. Number 10, development, feeling you are improving, developing, and advancement. What does that look like? I think, for many of us, it's been an opportunity to grow and develop, perhaps in sort of areas at home. So whether that is, learning to do a bit more exercise, learning to cook and to bake, learning, I don't know, some kind of new skill. And what's that looking like professionally? Are you having to need to learn new skills? And do you want to? Is there stuff that you're trying to learn to take, opportunities that may be coming up in the near future? Which ties into having a purpose. Now, there's a key one, having a purpose and a mission in life. Has that shifted recently? Where are you going? What does it look like where you're going? How much doubt has been thrown on that one? And tying up this sort of professional and personal purpose, are they still aligned? What does that look like? Significance at number 12, feeling that what you do is worthwhile. Value. And I guess that's one of the questions that many of us have now, is what I'm going to be doing worthwhile? What's the value in what I do? And at number 13, congruence, feeling that what you do is consistent with how you see yourself. Here's what I'm doing, and here's how I see the world, and is there congruence in that? And again, probably aligning that personal, professional. And that's the battle some people are kind of going through at the moment, really, is that sort of personal, professional realignment, because it's all come under the one roof, literally, hasn't it? The personal and professional, all of a sudden, domestic, social, professional, all suddenly got, thrown in together, and having to kind of make sense of that has been quite a struggle for some. Quite an interesting and exciting thing for others, but congruence, in line with kind of how you see yourself and what you're doing. And finally, connection, another one that may have taken a bit of a hit, feeling close and connected to the people around you. Hoping you feel kind of more connected to the people most close to you because you spent so much time with them. So I'd like to think that those of you that are with your partners, your kids, etc., feel closer, although that may have been under strain. But maybe the struggle is, obviously those that you are close to, your kind of more extended family, and being unable to see those was a difficulty that hopefully has been alleviated a little bit more recently. So those are the 14 characteristics of kind of well-being, and it is just worth giving it a little bit of thought, and taking maybe a little bit of time to kind of work through those, and obviously, on the one hand is where are you not scoring very highly, and what can you do about that, and having a strategy. But also, I would, as a positive psychology advocate, then looking at where you are kind of strong and where things are good, and realizing and recognizing that, and developing that even further, I think is really important. So it's strengths as well as perhaps weaknesses that's really important. So that might give us some indicators in terms of well-being. But let's just kind of go underneath that just a little bit, and let's go back to this mental toughness bit, our ability to be resilient, to show fortitude, and also to show endeavor. The mental toughness model, as I said, is a well-validated model. There is a psychometric profile test that you can do. There are actually several. There is the MTQ Plus, which is the sort of full version, which is all the subsets of the 4 Cs. I'll explain that in a moment or two. But there was also a kind of lighter version. There's also a student version. So these are psychometric tests that you can take. I'm qualified to administer those. You can find those, or I can give you details about those at any time, which measures your mental toughness, and essentially it does it on a scale of 1 to 10. You know, it measures 10 being extreme end of the scale, so extremely mentally tough, through to 1, not so. Let's be a little bit careful that the opposite of mental toughness is not mental weakness. The opposite of mental toughness is mental sensitivity, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, you know, scoring 1, 2, 3s and 4s just means that you are more mentally sensitive, no less talented in many areas. But the fact is, all the research will say that those that do score lower, who are more mentally sensitive, do struggle more when it comes to difficult and challenging times in particular. They may be high performers, but it's consistent high performance, particularly when going gets tough, that they struggle with. They do tend to have more problems with well-being and positive attitude. So we're looking for kind of scores above 5. We need to be a little bit careful about 9s and 10s. Perhaps we can be a little bit too mentally tough, too set in our ways, too rigid, too hard, perhaps. So either way, there's no necessarily rights or wrongs, but what there are is these scales which give us an indication of perhaps our degrees of mental toughness, our ability to manage in these difficult, challenging, stressful situations. The 4C model kind of looks like this. So we've looked at these 3 things: resilience, fortitude, and endeavour. Here are the 4 C's. Control. The first C is around control. I say the first, there's no particular order to this, although I always start with control. We then have commitment, confidence, and challenge. So the 4 C's of mental toughness is around control, commitment, confidence, and challenge. And as you can see, control and commitment tend to be those that are more attributed to resilience, and challenge and confidence, those are more sort of forward-looking, if you like, and so kind of match up with endeavour. These 4 C's are also broken down into subsets. So there are 2 subsets of each. So control, we talk about self-control and emotional control. I'll come back to these in a moment or 2. For commitment, we talk about goal setting, your ability, your willingness to set goals. But as well as that, your achievement orientation. So these people may be quite good at setting goals and set them frequently, but they may not be quite so good at achieving them. Goals may kind of disappear or just not come to fruition. We have people who are achievement orientated, but are not necessarily goal orientated, i.e. they achieve quite a lot, but they were never intending to do so, or they're not sure where it's taking them. Confidence is around self-confidence, self-efficacy, as well as social confidence, our ability to engage others, our ability to deal with conflict and difficult kind of interpersonal situations. Challenge is about learning and risk, or risk and learning, our propensity, our willingness to take risk, but also perhaps to learn from those risks. So those are the 4 C's and the 8 sort of subdomains of those. And as you say, by doing your mental toughness questionnaire, you can get a score against each one of those. And again, it's areas that you can recognize and continue to be good at, as well as to identify perhaps where you can develop, perhaps where you can get stronger, or decide whether you need to get stronger. Now, what I want to do then, in the time that we have remaining, really, is just spend 15 minutes looking at one of them, control. Just to give you kind of an example, because really it's the practical element that I'm interested in. You know, I'm not necessarily an academic. It's the practical application of this stuff that's important to me. And so, just by giving a little practical exercise here, then you know, this is something that I use quite a lot in the workplace with all kinds of people who may struggle a little bit with maintaining, number one, self-control, and particularly often emotional control. So what are we talking about here? Self-control. You may have seen this video. It's been around for a while. There's several of them, the marshmallow test. And just to kind of describe it very quickly, it's a video where you have children coming into a room, led into a room by a researcher, and researcher sort of puts a marshmallow in front of them, and says, I'm just going to leave the room for 5 minutes or so, but when I come back, if you haven't eaten that marshmallow, I'll give you another one. You'll have 2. And they walk out of the room. And the film just watches the video, just watches the children's struggle with controlling their desire to eat that marshmallow, and some succumb and some do not, and some go through a real mental torture in the process. And what's interesting, I guess, from the study point of view is that they followed this through for a long period afterwards, and those that were able to manage their control, if you like, those that were able to resist the taking the marshmallow, tended to do better at school and tended to do better at work. Now, it's a much bigger picture than this, so I don't want to kind of oversimplify something that's a bit more complicated, but our ability to manage our impulses and behaviors to achieve these long-term goals, the goal of the second marshmallow. What are these goals that you have? And in psychology, we often talk about locus of control. So internal and external locus of control. Those that are internal, or tend to be more internal, tend to believe that they make things happen, that they are responsible for their own future. So we talk these days often about growth mindset. That we can develop and grow and succeed through sort of dedication, application, and hard work, as opposed to an external locus of control, or some people now say sort of fixed mindset, where things happen to you. You don't have control of what's going on around you. It just happens to you, and you've just got to either put up with it or suffer. So, you know, we have this psychology of locus of control, and it was often, or is often described in these circles. For those of you that have seen this before, or something similar, the circles of influence. Stephen Covey, who wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, long time ago now, 20 odd years ago. And I think his first habit was be proactive, and within that were the circles of what he called the circles of influence, which is the middle circle. The exercise is this, the practical exercise that I want to kind of just ground in around self-control is this. Post-it notes are really good. I like using post-it notes in any kind of training session, and I use them myself all the time. And so here's the practical exercise that I'd encourage you to do. Find your post-it notes. On post-it notes, write down your challenges as they are at the moment. What are the things that are challenging you, that are testing your mental toughness, that you're finding stressful? And one per post-it note, just write them down. And once you've written them down, and however many that may be, you might want to plot them on this circle of control or concern. And I'll explain in a minute to do a bit more. I.e., what are the things, the challenges that you have control of? So a challenge for me is the housework. My wife has said that's always been a challenge for me, but it is one I'm in control of. I could pick up the Hoover. I could do the dusting. We're busy. We have a busy household. We've got the kids. We're both working. So housework is a challenge. However, it is one that's within our control and within my control, as is exercising, as I'm in control of being able to go out for a run or a swim, etc. Homeworking is I'm now in control of. I have the technology. I have Zoom. I have a camera. I have all these things that allow me to work from home. So these are things that I can control. They may still be a challenge. I may have to kind of keep control of them, and maybe I'm not fully in control. It may be that I just haven't taken the time or able to spend the time doing them, which means that there's still a challenge to be done, but I can do that, and that's what's important. As opposed to perhaps things that may concern me, challenges. Here's an obvious one, whatever that may look like. Here's another that's very relevant, or was very relevant in our household, as is this one. I am essentially self-employed, and so I still have to pay a mortgage, and that is a concern, and the sort of work coming through and in. So there are things that I can control, there are challenges that I can control, and there are challenges which concern me, where I feel I have limited, if not any control on. And these are the bits that we need to work on. These are the bits, obviously, that may keep us awake at night. And so here's the exercise that I want to kind of follow through. So just identifying these things and plotting them, I think is a really important exercise to look at. Am I taking control, or how do I take control of these things? Is there anything I can do? So these things, COVID, homeschooling, and mortgage, which concern me. let's turn into this practical exercise that's called ambitious targets. Ambitious targets comes from something that's often used in project management, something known as a theory of constraints, and we don't have the time to go into the depth of that. But theory of constraints, as they're used in project management, developed or what's come from the theory of constraints is a concept called ambitious targets. And so what I'm looking for you to do is to grab one of your challenges and turn that into an ambitious target, an aim, an intention, a purpose, a goal. Call it what you will. So the example that I have of homeschooling was a concern of mine, a very real concern, something I felt I had very little control of in terms of my daughter's technology, the school and what was going on, and time, etc., etc. There's a whole lot of things. So we kind of broke it down, and one of the things in particular was her becoming self-motivated to study math, not her favorite subject in the world, and was really kind of struggling with getting any kind of motivation to do the math that she needed to do. So here was our ambitious target. So here's what I want you to do is turn the challenge into some kind of ambitious target, some goal, some aim, and to put it down. And again, put it on a wall, put it on a flip chart, etc. Use a post-it note, write it in big letters, and this is where we're headed. The next part of the exercise is continue using your post-it notes and to start listing all the reasons why that is not going to happen, why that's difficult, what makes it a challenge. So here are some of the ones that came out from our kind of discussion, our exercise. She had no structure at the time. We're going back a month, 6 weeks or so now. The technology was poor. It wasn't working. Teams wasn't working very well. Her iPad wasn't working, etc. There was way too much distraction going on. She didn't feel like she had enough support, both from us or from her school, and she just didn't understand equations, was what she was being asked to study at the moment. So here was there were a few more, but here are some of the reasons why studying or becoming self-motivated to study math just wasn't going to happen in her mind. So once we had those down, then it's an exercise just in changing the language. So now we're going to write some new post-it notes, and literally we're not looking for solutions here, we're just going to change the language. So from no structure, we need to get structure. From not enough support, get enough support, etc., etc. So we're just changing the language, and there is a psychology then, and once we've changed the language, we know what has to happen, what in theory of constraints terms was often called an intermediate objective. We can get rid of the negative side. So we can get rid of all those post-it notes on the left-hand side because we now know what we have to do. What we now need to do, though, is put those in some kind of order. So the question is kind of which one has to happen first? Where do we need to start? And what we need to do then is start building a map towards our ambitious target. So what we can see now is we decided, and you decide your own order, but we decided that maybe the first thing we want to start with is having less distraction. That might help us get a bit more structure. With that structure, we can work out what kind of support is necessary. Then we can work on the technology, and then perhaps we can understand the equations, and then maybe we've got self-motivated. So now we can see the route, and that's really important when it comes to this kind of stuff in mental toughness, in well-being, in control, being able to see where we are going, the steps to where we're going. So drawing this map is important for me and for my daughter, so for others involved. It engages other people in the process. And it's proactive, it's positive. Absolutely, I see the kind of comment there, removing negative is absolutely the key. The thing is, that none of these are important except the first one. That's where we need to start. That's where the focus has to be. Less distraction. So that's where the process kind of started. But what came back surprised me, because what my daughter then said, well, it's not as easy as that, Dad. It's not as easy just to kind of have less distraction. Okay, I thought, well, let's go do this again. And off we went. We went the next level down. What's stopping us in terms of distraction? So there's our new ambitious target. And the radio was on loud next door, sister working in the same room, too many notifications coming up on her iPad, too many distractions outside the window, etc. So there's a whole lot of reasons why distraction was an issue. And off we went through that same kind of process again of then changing the language and then starting to go through that process. But what you can see is a drill down technique. It's a root cause analysis. It's about fundamentally kind of breaking things down to get to a place where we all of a sudden think, I can do that. I'm in control of that. I can go and turn the radio off next door. I can turn off my notifications. And that became really enabling for my daughter. That became something that said, I can do that. And actually quite enthusiastically go and do that. All of a sudden, motivation started to kick in, some drive. One small step on the long journey to becoming self-motivated to study math, but it was one step in the right direction. As they say, a journey of, 10,000 miles or something begins with a single step, but it's a single step in the right direction. And that's what's critical. It moves what is in the concern circle into the control circle, and it allows us to get on and do something. So I would encourage you very strongly to have a look at some of the challenges perhaps you're facing right now, or perhaps will be facing, and to see to what degree you feel in control of them. And if you do, great. But if you don't, then maybe follow that through with a bit of an ambitious exercise. And it may be useful. It may, drive you, find you, get you places that you hadn't really thought of, and set you off on that journey. So an exercise in self-control. I hope that's useful. And if not for you, then it's definitely one worth using within teams and an organization. Go back to work where you have challenges coming up. Maybe people are going, I don't know how we're going to cope. I don't know how we're going to do this. Using exercises such as that may well help. The last thing, and I'm going to kind of leave you with this. So I'm going to take 5 minutes if that's okay, and then stop, and any questions that come over, then be very happy to see if I can help answer. But the other element was around emotional control. And I think this one is worth a mention. And I'm just going to refer you all, many of you may have come across this before already, the chimp paradox. I think if we want to start thinking about emotional control, then look no further at this stage of the game in terms of the chimp paradox. A guy called Dr. Steve Peters wrote this about 5 or 6 years ago. And just to give you a very quick snapshot of this, and one of the sayings I like in the book was when was the last time you said or did something, or even thought something, that quite quickly afterwards you kind of wish you hadn't? And for many of us, it was pretty recently. For many of us, it's been already several times today, perhaps, is where you kind of do something, you think, oh, I just shouldn't have done that. That wasn't the right thing to do. You say something and said, oh, I'm better than that. It's that virtuous self. It's that arete that we talk about in the Stoicism bit, is being your best self. And how often do we let ourselves down by thinking, doing, saying the wrong thing, particularly under pressure and stress and in challenging situations? So ask yourself that question, and if it happens fairly frequently, maybe the chimp paradox is a good place to start in terms of gaining a little bit more emotional control. And I put this kind of little graphic up, and for fear that it takes way longer to explain than we have. But Steve Peters talks about the limbic system, our emotional control center in the heart of our brain. So the limbic system is in control of our emotions, essentially, and he calls it the chimp. The bit that can get us into an awful lot of trouble, the bit that says and does the stuff that we kind of wish we hadn't often. Why? Because it's working in the kind of fight or flight. Its absolute aim is survival, and that's about as far as it goes. And so that prompts the emotional response, sometimes known as the amygdala hijack. But it is just an operating system. We do have our human, which is our kind of frontal lobe, if you like, our neocortex, our ability to ration, reason, and make sense of things. It's just not quite as strong as our chimp. So our chimp often dominates. So 3 things I'm going to leave you with, but go read the book if you're interested in emotional control. But these are taken not directly from the book, so there's a slightly different take on these things, but just 3 quick things that I'm only going to touch upon, and I do, particularly with the second one, encourage you to kind of dig a bit deeper on. So number 1, he talks about exercising your chimp. And there's 2 things here. 1, physical exercise. Physical exercise is absolutely key in terms of physical well-being and mental toughness. So if you're not exercising, go and exercise. But it's not just exercise, it's your diet, your nutrition, your hydration, your sleeping. All of those are really important. To physically, if you're in good shape, then mentally you tend to be in better shape. Your chimp is under better control. Exercising also is allowing your emotions out. So this is important to be able to go out and show emotion, to go have fun, to go be angry, to go and be emotional, whatever that looks like. So exercising your chimp is about allowing those emotions out. And part, what I call then, is often called venting. So this could be positive, is go and show exuberance and excitement, but venting can also be things like your frustrations. And having someone to vent to has been important, and maybe that's one of the things we struggle with a little bit, is if we don't have the same level of contact with those at work, then maybe just having a whinge and a moan, that kind of just that release of emotion, is not as available as it was. So being able to vent to someone, and I mean that in a very positive sense, you know, just whinge and moan to someone, it is really important to have, but they kind of need to know what's going on. And it's a very difficult thing to do, and has been a very difficult thing to do when we have a sort of close family environment and your partner and your kids are the only ones you're able to vent with. That cannot be a good idea. So venting can also be talking to yourself, though. So self-talk is important. Whinging to yourself, moaning to yourself, going out and just kind of, you know, allowing your emotions to go out on your walk or your jog or in the garden or somewhere, I think is really important. So allowing those frustrations out in a controlled way is really important. And for those of you that struggle with that, then do going to have a look at the book and find ways to be able to exercise and or vent your chimp better. And then finally, box your chimp. And box your chimp is essentially about managing your chimp. It's about teaching your chimp that there are appropriate times, if you like. And if your chimp trusts you because you allow it to vent or you exercise it well by giving it nutrition, then it will tend to listen to you and will control itself and will only kind of come out when you allow it out. But if you don't have good management skills with your chimp, then boxing it becomes very difficult. The most obvious techniques in terms of boxing are things like counting to 10 and breathing techniques, breathing deeply. So under stress, and if we're suddenly all of a sudden kind of feeling we're about to lose it, then boxing your chimp just might be, hang on chimp, just count to 10. Distraction techniques are really important. So emotional control and self-control are fundamental when it comes to mental toughness. And mental toughness, I think, is absolutely key when it comes to not just well-being, but also high performance at work. So there was a little snapshot, just a quick whiz through what is a huge subject, but I hope it's been of interest to you. I hope maybe it's given you something to think about. I hope even maybe it's given you something practical you can do in terms of self-control exercise. Use your post-it notes. But otherwise, folks, thank you very much for your time over lunch. And I'm very happy to answer any questions, if possible, in the time we've got left. So thank you very much indeed, all.
Thanks ever so much, David. I haven't seen any questions come up. Dawn, well, as you know, I've got a copy of the Chimp Paradox and also my Hidden Chimp, which is the children's version,
yeah,
which is still currently propping up my screen on my home office desk. And I do have every intention of reading both. And I can see Dawn's passed a comment that it's a good book, and every time you mention it, people always say it's a good book, and I revisit my intention to read it, but finding the time is a challenge. So has anyone got any comments, questions, thoughts that they would like to share at all? I'm just going to post the links again so that you've got access to the survey and a few other bits. In the meantime, whilst we just see if anyone has got any comments, if I may, just going to take control for a second, David, and just share a few slides about...
Oh, I just did miss that one at the end, didn't I? Oops, updates.
Right, hold on.
Sorry, Helen.
Are you going to get told off?
Yeah, I always get it. Always that last. I always got there at the end, and I just missed that last one.
Okay, well, that's excellent. I'm going to stop. Well, actually, let's just see if we can work this out. If I stop, and then let's see if I can work out how to share again. We're not quite at the position where this is all seamless yet.
Julie, there are some questions coming through.
Oh, are there? Okay, can I ask you to take those? Would you mind?
David, are you reading them?
Yes, so theorists in terms of mental health. Very happy to put a couple together, some thoughts on that one rather than kind of jump out. Let me give that a little bit of thought. And very happy to kind of offer some thoughts in terms of theories and theorists which I can suggest. So allow me just to put that and pass that on, if that's okay, Ryan. Take part in a lot of physical motivating yourself when you feel like giving up. I guess for me, they're trying to find an easy answer here. I think it's about creating habits. So for me, there are things that it's like a New Year's resolution, isn't it? You're motivated to make a change. You're motivated to do something. But that motivation starts to wane, and so you start to rely on willpower. And that's the bit, often that we're overusing, because willpower is kind of finite. Willpower is like a battery; it runs down. So we're losing motivation. So we're having to employ willpower, and when that runs out, we're really struggling. And that's why getting up in the morning and getting out for a run, for example, becomes really difficult. For me, it's about ingraining habits. It's about building habits. So actually, I don't actually think about these things. I just go and do them because it's what I do. And so it doesn't matter what the weather is, for example, if we're talking about physical training, I just do it because that's what's on my program and that's what I do. That's my habit. It's like going to work. It's like brushing my teeth. So I think one of the things is about getting to the place where it's a habit, where you haven't got to think about it and it's just something you do. But aligned with that one is you have to keep going back to your purpose. Why are you doing it? And you've got to have good reason for it. There's got to be here's a massive, we spend hours on this one, but just finding your purpose, understanding why you're doing stuff, I think is critical, whatever you're doing, whether that's work, whether that's domestically, and certainly in the sporting arena. What's it for? What's it all about? Because if you can't justify that, then you're going to really struggle getting out of bed in the morning. So that's about the best I can give in the short period of time, if that helps a little bit. An average score, I would hope that an average score sits just above halfway. So literally you could probably go halfway house on this one. If we did it out of 10, then 70 you'd kind of think is okay, but I would still have slight concerns. I want, from a well-being point of view, to be around about 75, 80, going up towards 90 shows a reasonable level of well-being. But certainly below 70, then you're starting to think there are obviously some lower scores in there, or just a general sense, and that would be putting up some red flags. I don't know if that helps at all. But it's about context as well, isn't it? It's about kind of what period of time have you looked at that over, and how much thought have you given it, etc. But yeah, kind of go halfway house, and that'll give you an idea. How can we use this for employees returning to the office to help their mental being to get back into work, especially when they've been on furlough? Yeah, I think the obvious and the easy answer is to go measure it. So one of the things you can do is use the tool. Go. I don't know if you're in a position to be able to do that, but get people to kind of to go through the psychometric test, find out where their scores are, and then look to put some kind of development action in place. But I think you can also just have the conversation. So I think this is about being in touch and just making sure that you're having these conversations with people in terms of how they feel about moving forward, kind of where they're at right now and how they feel about moving forward. And just by kind of understanding those 4 C's, you can start to ask the questions about whether they feel in control, how committed they feel, whether they're looking forward to a challenge, whether their confidence has been knocked, and just kind of understanding the basics can allow you to ask them questions to find out kind of where they're coming from. So I think is that talking to people is absolutely key, finding out what it's like for each individual, but just an awareness of this kind of stuff I think is really important. Otherwise there's a lot of depth to it, and I think spending time with individuals on a one-to-one basis, that's where I spend my time as a coach, is just being able to help people put the development interventions in place that help people build this mental toughness bit, because it is needed. It's always needed, but perhaps it's needed more so than ever at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just add to that, David. Obviously, returning people, whether they're working from home or currently on furlough, returning people to work in the workplace is going to be a difficult challenge. And I mean, I've talked about this quite a lot recently around different people will have had different experiences. Some will have suffered bereavements, etc., and some will be happy to talk about it, and some won't. And I think that is going to be a challenge between colleagues, let alone between line managers, etc. And I think starting to think about that, and using these tools not only for ourselves but also for wider teams is going to be a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, awareness is absolutely key. And you're absolutely right. Is the trouble with the broad brush is, as you say, you have those who have really had a hard time, and maybe things like bereavement on the one scale, and others who have had a brilliant time, and actually they just don't want to go back to work in the same way. And so you're coming at it from completely different angles. But each one has, still has, issues, and still has things that we need to kind of help work through, and ultimately they need to work through. Mental toughness is for the individual, but it's to how we can support that, and being aware, being conscious, and finding a way to be able to offer the right kind of support, I think is really important, and most of it is just open and honest communication.
Hold on, I've muted myself. Have you got any suggestions for training to put in place for employees, empowering them during the pandemic and supporting them back to work? Helen, I think, well, sorry, I'm saying Helen, it might not be Helen. H. Groves, if you are happy to share that, I will be perfectly happy to share that with everybody else as well. So, sorry, over to you, David.
So which way are we going?
So this is from Bukola, 128 in the chat, if that helps.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's a bit of kind of advising too, in terms of training. It depends what you mean by training. I guess to support employees, to empower them. So there's all kinds of training that I think, for me, it's not. Before the training bit is I'll be wanting to sit down with people and just kind of find out where they're at. I think that's a really important thing, is to be able to work out what they need. We need to kind of find out where they're at. So I wouldn't be kind of rushing to throw things at people at this stage of the game, because I think there's, on the one hand, you've got the sort of psychological side of things, the well-being, the mental toughness is what, as we just described, is what has happened to you. What's your experience of the past 3 months been like, and then what do you need to kind of get back into some kind of rhythm and mode? So it becomes an individual thing, never mind the kind of formal training that may be needed in terms of upskilling. So I think the first part is really important in terms of before training, is to be able to kind of sit down and see where people are at in terms of both skill and capability, but absolutely psychologically. And then you need to put, absolutely, I think there needs to be things put in place, and I would suggest that there is training in things like well-being. I think well-being training, mental toughness training, I think are really important, so that people begin to understand the concepts and are able to help themselves. Is to have practical strategies. So training would be let's look at practical ways that we can break these things down: mental toughness, well-being. And then find solutions, find things that we can do that are practical, that are work related, etc. So it's absolutely a process, I think.
Okay, brilliant. All right, I think we've covered everyone's questions there, I think, yes. So what I will just say, I can't find how I can share it now. So just a well, first of all, thank you to David for your time. People
you.
have, I've enjoyed it certainly, and always pick up something slightly different every time I've listened through. And everyone else I can see has enjoyed it as well. So please do. I've posted some links to. First of all, the series of webinars that you mentioned, David, through the Lighthouse Group. Also, just to let you know, everybody, we have launched our next event. So 2 of our committee members, Branch and Group, are looking at professional courage and influence. At the start of that event, we are going to be holding our branch annual meeting. It isn't going to take too long, but we would love for you all to come along and listen to what we've done within the branch over the past year or so, and what we will be doing into the future. Unfortunately, during that, we will also be saying goodbye to some of our members. So we're hoping that a good number of you will be able to come along and pass on our thanks for that. So as I say, the links are there. Finally, as always, we'd love to know what you thought about today and what you might like to see us doing in the future. If you haven't heard, the events in the future will continue to be online until at least January of next year. So please do have to think about what might lend itself to the online forum. Finally, just a reminder that the branch do have a Facebook group page. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you can follow the group, the branch, on Eventbrite, so that as and when we post events, you'll get notified when they go live. So please do ask to join the, well, I think you do have to ask to join LinkedIn. I think everything else you can just follow, etc. So please do get involved. So that's all I wanted to say. So just again, thank you to you, David, for your time. Really enjoyed it, and thank you to everyone for listening. I know we were due to have 100 and something. I think we went up to 65, which is great, and I know that a good number of people are looking at using the recording. We will send out the recording after the session once it's available. I'll send out a reminder of the link to the survey as well. So thank you, everybody. Please do take care. Please do get involved with the branch and start the conversations, or keep the conversations going. So thank you very much, and that's all from me and all from David. So thank you.
Bye-bye.